Certainly. Here's Section 1 of the HFY sci-fi story based on the outline of when humanity entered the war. Victory took only 5 hours. The story begins in a war-ravaged galaxy just before humanity joins the fight. The war had no beginning, at least not one anyone remembered. For over 3 millennia, the galaxy bled from 1,000 wounds. Civilizations rose, stagnated, and collapsed in the same trenches. Planets were taken, lost, and taken again. Every tactic had been tried, every weapon had been used. The front lines had become a ritual, a sacrament of attrition. Victory was no longer a goal. It was a myth whispered by dying soldiers in sterilized infirmaries. High Strategist Velencor of the Threx Dominion stood on the edge of Observation Deck 7, staring at the burning skies of Yox Prime. Somewhere in the haze, the 113th Legion was dying. Their screams didn't reach him, but the glowing cloud rising above the western plateau told enough. Another front had collapsed, another million gone. Behind him, the Condes flickered with tactical holograms, lines, dots, numbers. None of it meant anything anymore. The war maps hadn't shifted in months. They rarely did. He turned slowly, claws clasped behind his back, and walked into the darkened war chamber where his sub-commanders waited in heavy silence. The enemy has reinforced the Malix corridor. One of them croaked, voice dry from recycled air. We've lost orbital control of Quadrant 8. The Carrax front has requested withdrawal. Velen didn't respond. He lowered himself into the central throne, a seat not of royalty, but of burden. His golden armor was dull, scratched from decades of service. He looked at no one, only muttered, "How many?" Unclear. Likely all. The silence lingered like a fog. No one moved. No one dared offer false hope. Velen finally raised his head. His voice was sharper now, the voice of command. Summon the Coalition Council. Immediate assembly. Remote transmission acceptable. We need ... options. The word felt foreign on his tongue. Within the hour, the Galactic War Council formed. 32 species, each represented by their highest-ranking tacticians. Some were scaled, some feathered. Some had no mouths to speak. But they all shared the same expression: exhaustion. The Akari Enclave offered to deploy antimatter satellites over the enemy supply lines. The Tour of Swarm suggested flooding the moons of Threx space with biological horrors bred in labs. The Kalan delegates bickered about alliances, betrayals, logistics. Velen listened for a time. Then he raised one hand. "There's another option," he said. They turned to him. Uncertain, he continued. "I propose we initiate Protocol X silence," then muttering, then outright outrage. "That's suicide," barked General Callan of the Borowin, their unstable, Histakari tactician. "Uncontrollable, dangerous to allies and enemies alike. They're a myth." A Kalan archivist snapped. "No one's seen them in centuries." Velen waited until the noise faded. "We've exhausted every tactic, every strategy, every soldier. We are losing, slowly, inevitably. The war will outlast all of us, unless something changes." Moment of stillness followed. From the shadows, an old Arcanian scientist cleared his throat. "There is ... one record of contact. Fragmented, corrupted, but dated 412 standard years ago. A scout vessel encountered a Terran construct beyond the Orion expanse. No formal exchange, but the probe's data logs showed traces of artificial gravity, carbon-based life, and advanced stealth emissions." Velen leaned forward, and the scientist swallowed. The probe was deconstructed in orbit. Every atom stripped. Its destruction took less than 3 seconds. No one spoke. Velen took a slow breath. "I've reviewed the same records. We once deemed them too erratic to invite into the coalition. too warlike. Their history made that clear. Thousands of years of conflict, civil strife, global annihilation scenarios. Yet somehow, they survived, and then they vanished. Isolated themselves until now. Kalen scoffed. You would call ghosts to fight our war. I would call monsters, Velen said, if it meant ending this. Reluctantly, the council voted. The motion passed narrowly. Protocol X was activated. A signal was transmitted through the ancient long-range array, an encoded beacon laced with old human languages, forgotten diplomatic tags, emergency codes. No one expected a reply. They had no idea if Earth even existed anymore, or if humanity had devoured itself. As many predicted, they didn't wait long. 6 minutes after transmission, the deck lights dimmed. The war room's communications array flared to life and an AI voice announced, incoming response. Origin. Sol system, decryption in progress. A single message appeared on the central display. No flourish, no introduction. Request acknowledged. Human Expeditionary Force en route. Estimated time of arrival, 11 minutes. For a moment, it didn't register. Velen rose slowly, eyes locked on the message. 11 minutes, not days, not weeks. 11 minutes. Is this a joke? Murmured the Kalen archivist. The AI clarified, vessel signature confirmed. Warp ingress detected. Celerogen craft approaching. The room went cold. One of Valen's junior officers checked his own systems manually. His fingers trembled. A ship just exited void space near our orbital perimeter. Configuration ... unknown. It matches no coalition vessel, no enemy class. It's sleek. Black hull, no visible weapons. It's just ... floating. Velen turned to the display just as external sensors fed in a grainy image. A lone vessel, angular, matte black, silent, then another, and another. 6 ships in total. No insignia, no broadcasted IDs, no signals, just presence. Controlled, deliberate, oppressive. The silence in the war chamber was broken by a second message. This time audio. A man's voice, calm, cold. This is Commander Darius Ward of the Terran Black Division. We are here to fulfill your request. Prepare for joint tactical. Briefing. Transmission ends. No pleasantries. No demands. Just purpose. Velen realized he was holding his breath. Darius Ward. The name echoed like a war drum, and suddenly, the endless war didn't feel so endless anymore. Let me know when you're ready for Section 2, or if you'd like a thumbnail prompt and video description for this story. The humans didn't dock. They didn't request landing codes or supply logistics or ceremonial clearance. They simply arrived 6 matte black ships that ignored all orbital protocols, hovering above Yox Prime like silent omens. No markings, no windows. No visible weapons. Yet their presence radiated a pressure that the most seasoned Threx officers couldn't explain. Velen Corps stood in the planetary control tower, surrounded by a half-dozen commanders and defense officials. Every one of them watched the feed in. Silence. Atmospheric disturbances swirled unnaturally around the human craft, though the skies were clear. Static scratched across the speakers, sharp enough to make one technician wince and stagger back. Then the message came, brief, motionless, and final. This is Commander Darius Ward, requesting direct transit to Surface Command, IETA 3 minutes. That was all. Velen gave the order to clear the air lanes. He didn't bother asking if the humans had landing coordinates. Of course they did. I probably had schematics of every floor of the command compound. Probably downloaded them during the first 7 seconds of orbit. When the human shuttle descended, it did not burn. It did not roar. It simply lowered, cutting the air as if the atmosphere didn't dare resist. The craft touched down without ceremony, and the main ramp hissed open, not with theatrical smoke, but with a clean surgical detachment. 3 humans emerged, all male, all silent. They wore no ornate armor, no tribal colors, no banners. Their suits were matte black like their ships, with soft ridges of kinetic armor across the chest, and dull shoulder plates marked only by thin silver bands. No rank insignia, no name tags. Their faces were pale and expressionless, eyes hidden behind adaptive visors. And yet, every Threxian soldier in the hangar instinctively stepped back as they passed. Darius Ward was at the front. He moved like a man who did not need to run. Each step was deliberate, smooth, and terrifyingly controlled. He said nothing as Velen approached, flanked by subcommanders and security escorts. Darius stopped 3 feet away, just close enough to show he wasn't intimidated, and just far enough to show he wasn't impressed. Velen broke the silence. "Commander Ward, welcome to Yox. A crime." I know who you are," Ward interrupted, voice low but clear. "We've reviewed your command files. The Dominion's strategic layout is suboptimal, but salvageable. Your eastern quadrant is vulnerable. That will be our entry point." Velen blinked. "We've held that front for 8 years. It's a blood trench." Ward tilted his head slightly. "Not anymore." Before Velen could reply, one of the other humans, taller, broader, face half-scarred, handed over a holopad. It displayed a full assault plan. Troop drops, synchronized breaches, artificial weather distortion, signal blackouts, and precision strikes at 25 target nodes. Estimated timeline: 2 hours, 41 minutes. "This is impossible," Velen said quietly. "Not for us," Ward replied. He didn't say it with arrogance. It wasn't boastful. It was worse. It was casual, spoken like a fact too boring to embellish. Velen glanced at his officers. Most avoided eye contact. "Your forces will operate under your own command," Ward continued, "but will follow our timeline exactly. Deviate and your casualties will increase." "Are you threatening us?" Velen asked, with a trace of anger. "No," Ward said. "I'm saving your lives." He turned and walked past, heading toward the east corridor of the base. The other 2 followed without so much as a nod. They didn't ask for quarters. They didn't inquire about food, fuel, or diplomacy. They came for war, and they had already started by the time Velen reached the command center. The humans had integrated into the main battle grid. Their ships hovered at key elevations, emitting low-frequency pulses that scrambled enemy sensors. Drones unseen until now slipped into the atmosphere like whispers. Screens lit up across the room with fresh telemetry, enemy heat signatures, underground tunnel maps, and encrypted voice chatter. "How did they get this data?" one Threx technician asked, voice cracking. "No," another whispered. "How long have they had it?" At precisely the 60-minute mark after their initial arrival, the humans launched their assault. No trumpet, no declaration, just action from the orbiting ships. Small capsules fell silent, sleek, barely larger than a drop pod. They hit the surface and shattered open. Dozens of human operatives emerged, dispersing like smoke. They didn't move. In formation. They didn't signal each other. They flowed across the terrain like liquid shadows. Enemy defenses didn't respond. They couldn't. Human code injection I had already infiltrated the enemy's COM network 5 minutes prior. The enemy saw only static. Their heavy artillery rotated at random. Their targeting systems mistook allies for threats. Panic spread before a single shot was fired, and when the shots came, they were surgical. 1 bullet, 1 kill. Velen watched in mute disbelief as the supposedly impenetrable Malix corridor fell in 17 minutes. Enemy commanders were either missing or broadcasting surrender codes. Human operatives never spoke, never celebrated. They just moved to the next target. One Threx colonel exhaled slowly. "We've been fighting this war for centuries." Velen didn't respond. A short-range ping sounded on the holomap. A lone human operator was holding a ravine position, call sign, Ghost. Enemy counter-assault. 2 battalions. Result, all hostiles neutralized. No human casualties. Engagement. Duration, 6 minutes. "Who is this Ghost?" Balan asked. No one answered. The human files were redacted. An hour passed, every front moved. Enemy battle groups began collapsing. Entire units surrendered without resistance. Some fired on their own commanders just to avoid fighting the humans. Strategic points fell like dominoes. Velen's command map, once a maze of blood-red sectors, now shimmered with fast-expanding green dot. Then the final call came. A voice transmission from Human Command. Phase 1 complete. Time elapsed 58 minutes. Phase 2 commencing. Velen leaned forward slowly. No emotion stirred in him. Only something colder, older. Recognition, this wasn't just war. This was the end of it, and it had only just begun. Valancourt had seen many things in Warstar systems reduced to ash, oceans boiled from orbit, soldiers reduced to whispers on battlefield dust. But he had never seen silence become a weapon. And yet, wherever the humans moved, silence followed. Not because they were stealthy, though they were. Not because they erased signals and jammed broadcasts, though they did. But because the enemy no longer dared to speak. The Malix corridor, once a graveyard of countless Threx legions, was quiet. Now, no gunfire, no retreat sirens. Just the wind moving through trenches that had been red with blood for 8 years. Now reclaimed and under 1.VALA and stood atop an outpost tower, watching the black-armored Terran units spread through the captured zone. Their movements were disturbingly fluid, fast, but never rushed, decisive, but never wasteful. Like they knew what came next before it happened. One of them stopped beside a burning enemy transport. He raised a hand to his helmet, and a tiny burst of light sparked at his fingertip. Then he walked away. Seconds later, the transport's hull caved in on itself, collapsing like wet paper. No explosion, just removal. Darius Ward approached without warning, the soles of his boots soundless on the steel floor. Velen hadn't heard the human commander coming. He didn't like that. "We've secured Phase 2 targets," Ward said. "All 34. Enemy bunkers neutralized. Air superiority is absolute." Velen glanced at the tactical display on his gauntlet. "What about resistance in the Cavor canyons?" Ward didn't look at the screen. Handled. That canyon network housed elite units. Even our best warriors were held there for weeks. Ghost was deployed. Velen paused. "Ghost." Ward nodded once. "He's efficient." Bet. The name had come up before. No file attached. No unit designation. Just a call sign. Ghost. A rumor moving faster than the war itself. Did he work alone? Ward's expression didn't change. Always does. Velen should have asked more. Should have pressed. But something in Ward's voice, the absolute, emotionless certainty, choked off the question before it left his throat. He turned instead toward the comms tower, where the Coalition Council's signal crackled in and out, disrupted by the atmospheric interference the humans were now actively manipulating. From within, a stream of requests and queries poured in, commands demanding explanations. Strategists scrambling to keep up with the rapid shifts on the battlefield. They want a briefing. Velen said. Ward gave a short exhale that might have been a sigh, or just filtered breath through his rebreather. "They'll get one when the war's over." Velen turned to face him fully. "You're not even pretending to cooperate." "We're not here to play politics," Ward said. "We're here to finish what you started." Velen bristled. War was never ours alone. Ward met his gaze, unblinking. "And yet, we're the ones ending it." Behind them, the sky flashed white as another human orbital strike silently lanced across the horizon. No debris fell, nothing burned. Whatever had been there no longer existed. "Why now?" Velen asked, voice quieter. "Why respond now, after all these centuries?" Ward was still. Then, finally, he said, "Because this is the first time you asked properly." Velen frowned. "Properly?" "You asked with desperation. You asked knowing you wouldn't survive." Without us, Ward's tone held no cruelty, only observation. "That matters." Before Velen could reply, a second voice came through on the encrypted Linka, harsh. Guttural burst of Threxian mixed with Terran code. One of Velen's lieutenants decoded it instantly. "It's the enemy," the officer said, stunned. "There?" "Central Command. They're requesting terms of surrender." Velen froze. That was impossible. No major surrender had occurred in generations. The enemy didn't give up. They were bred for war, engineered for siege. Their doctrine revolved around sacrifice. Ward didn't react. He merely said, "Tell them to stand down. We'll handle the rest." "You're rejecting the surrender?" Velen asked sharply. "No," Ward replied. "I'm letting them understand what surrender means." He turned and walked away. Hours passed. The battlefield shifted again. Not through destruction, but through withdrawal. Enemy lines dissolved. Some units vanished into the hills, abandoning hardware, leaving their dead uncollected. Others simply dropped their weapons and waited. A few committed mass detonation, unwilling to face capture. Velen reviewed intercepted transmissions. Many weren't military orders. They were recordings of enemy soldiers speaking in hushed, terrified tones. "They're not like us. They see everything. We never stood a chance." He forwarded them to the Coalition Council. No response. Came at dusk. Velen requested a tour of the Cavor Canyon site. Ward approved without comment. The descent was quiet. Velen rode a hover skiff alongside one of the humans, a younger soldier. Lean and sharp-eyed, visor pulled up just enough to show pale skin marred by burn scars. They passed through canyons still littered with enemy mechs. None moved. Some had been crushed inward, folded like scrap. Others bore no visible damage at all, just silence. "How many of you were deployed here?" Velen asked the soldier. "One." Velen turned to him. "You mean one squad?" The soldier didn't answer. Eventually, they reached the narrowest ravine-blackened earth, shattered stone, rows of enemy corpses that hadn't even drawn their blades. At the far end, Velen saw a figure crouched on a ledge, rifle slung across. His back, helmet off, ghost. He looked ordinary, human, just a man. His eyes were pale gray, almost silver in the fading light. He didn't rise when they approached. Velen stepped off the skiff and stood a few feet away. "You held this position alone?" Ghost didn't answer. He simply reached into a pouch, pulled out a data drive, and held it out. Velen took it. "Enemy patterns," Ghost said at last, voice flat and calm. They were probing for weakness. "Didn't expect a counter-sniper up high," adjusted there. "Formation after the second wave. Took them 37 minutes to figure out I was alone." "And after that?" Velen asked. "They stopped coming." Velen studied the man, not just the body, but the weight behind his eyes, something old and bottomless. There was no joy in his work, no pride, just clarity. "What drives you?" Velen asked quietly. Ghost looked at him then, really looked. "Ending it. Fast." There was no poetry in it, no vengeance. Just intent. As they rose back out of the canyon, Velen looked out over the horizon. Human ships hung like silent judges. Above the Earth, coalition fleets were arriving in orbit, too late to matter. Enemy resistance had fractured beyond recovery. The war 3,000 years of fire, bone, and futility was ending. Not with celebration, not with treaties, but with silence. And something in that silence felt colder than death. Velen whispered, "What have we unleashed?" There was no answer. There didn't need to be. The enemy homeworld surrendered at exactly 4 hours and 39 minutes after humanity's arrival. No negotiations, no ultimatums, no siege. A single transmission was intercepted, scrambled, desperate, and half-choked with static. The enemy. Supreme Warlord's voice trembled through a fractured signal, uttering a phrase that no species in the galaxy had ever heard them say: "We yield." The Coalition Council's secure channel erupted in disbelief. Some accused the enemy of deceit. Others feared it was a trap. Valancourt said nothing. He merely stared at the display where the signal pulsed. Weak but real. He knew better than to doubt. Beside him, Darius Ward stood motionless. His visor was off now, revealing a face chiseled by time and violence. His eyes, an unnerving shade of blue, watched the screen without emotion. "They're telling the truth," he said calmly. "Their command structure has collapsed. Surrender." "Is the only command still circulating?" Velen turned. "So it's over." "No," Ward replied. "It ends when we say it does." The words should have disturbed him. And they did. But not for the reason he expected. "What are your intentions, Commander?" Ward looked at him not with malice or contempt, but something far colder. "Finish the job. Ensure there is no relapse. Disarm them. Dismantle them. Remove their ability to rebuild. We've seen what happens when you leave an enemy intact." Velen swallowed hard. "And if the Council refuses to authorize that?" Ward didn't blink. "Then we proceed without authorization." It wasn't a threat. It was a plan already. In motion, Velen followed Ward into the command deck, where live feeds from orbit filled the enemy war factories imploding from within. Command towers reduced to dust, fleets drifting powerlessly as their systems failed. Human cyber warfare AI had spread like wildfire, embedding itself in enemy infrastructure and turning it against them. What hadn't been destroyed was being methodically deconstructed. Ward approached the central console. He typed a series of silent commands into his gauntlet. Moments later, one final ship decloaked in low orbit larger than the rest, obsidian-colored, with a silhouette like a black blade. Its name appeared on the screen, the Oblitus. Velen's blood chilled. "That's a dreadnought," he said. "But we never saw it arrive." Ward replied without turning. "It was always here, watching insurance. And now, it delivers the message." Velen stepped forward, sensing the weight behind those words. "What message?" Ward turned his head slightly. "That humanity doesn't come to occupy. We come to end." The Oblitus fired once. A thin white line traced the sky, almost invisible. No explosion, no shockwave. Just a ripple of gravity and a distant hum that faded as quickly as it began. A moment later, every remaining orbital platform over the enemy. Worlds ceased functioning. Engines died. Lights flickered out. The planet's atmosphere adjusted subtly, as if a breath had been released. Velen watched it all happen from space, and for the first time in centuries, there were no new fires. Only stillness. A comms officer looked up. "The enemy has issued a general stand-down order across the entire sector. 13 systems are disengaging. No sign of coordinated retreat or resistance." Ward didn't react. He simply said, "Begin withdrawal protocol. We're done here." Velen stepped back, stunned. That's it. Ward nodded. The enemy's capacity for war has been broken. Their psychological infrastructure is shattered. Let them rebuild their culture if they choose, but they will never rebuild an army. Velen's voice dropped. And what if they try? Then, "You call us again," Ward said. Once, the word hung like a blade. Velen followed him to the exit bay, where the other Terran operatives were already boarding their transports. No celebration, no banners, just quiet efficiency. "Why leave now?" Velen asked. "You could take control, shape the future of this entire region." Ward looked over his shoulder, and for the first time, there was something like emotion in Amak'Dia's. And his eyes, not ambition, not pride, weariness. "We don't want your empire. We don't want your politics. We want one thing: silence, peace bought with certainty. If you can maintain it, we'll never return." Velen hesitated. "And if we can't?" Ward stepped onto the ramp of the waiting ship. "Then next time, we won't leave." The hatch sealed behind him. Within minutes, the Terran fleet disappeared from sensors, no engines, no jump trails. One moment present, the next gone. As if they had never been there at all. The Coalition Council reconvened 2 days later. They drafted formal peace declarations, tried to attach credit to names, to species, to strategies. But the truth whispered. Through the ranks, none of it mattered. The war had ended because humanity arrived. No one had expected them. Fewer still had understood them. And now, every civilization in the galaxy feared the same truth. The humans weren't heroes. They weren't saviors. They were the final consequence. Velencor stood alone in the ruins of the war chamber. The shattered remains of 1,000 failed campaigns archived in the walls around him. He held the last data slate Ward had left behind. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. Just a line of text. War is a loop. We break loops. Velen looked out the window at the sky, clear now, unscarred for the first time in living memory. It was over, but the silence it left behind was not peace. It was a reminder, a quiet oath made by a species that had mastered war. So thoroughly they used it only as a final punctuation. And if it came again, they would return. Not as reinforcements, but as the end.